Welcome back to the Sustainable Design Lab podcast brought to you by Veritiv. In this podcast, we explore the big ideas that are reshaping the future of packaging. My name is Chris Bradley, and I lead the Sustainable Design Lab for Veritiv. This episode is part 2 in our EPR for Packaging Masterclass series. We are assuming that you have listened to the EPR overview, as well as part 1, the fundamentals, where we discussed how EPR works, eco-modulation fees, PROs, covered materials categories, and other important topics. If you are not familiar with these topics or have skipped ahead, we strongly encourage you to listen to those episodes before continuing with this class. Okay, let's dig in. This episode is a deep dive into Oregon's specific EPR program. Please note that the information that we share on this podcast is not legal advice and should be used only as an overview of the regulatory landscape surrounding packaging. Each company's situation involves variables that determine how these regulations apply, and you should consult your legal counsel regarding how specific regulations impact your business. Please also note that when we refer to sustainable packaging or sustainable products, we mean that generally the packaging or product produces less harmful impacts to health and the environment than other options, or has an attribute such as being recyclable or compostable that is generally considered to be less harmful to health and the environment than packaging without those attributes. Whether a product is sustainable may mean different things depending on what objective is trying to be achieved. The Oregon program is described in detail in a 397-page document that you can obtain by joining the PRO, which is the Circular Action Alliance, and then signing their producer agreement. Now, I'm not going to review every detail of what is included in that program. I'm just going to highlight the areas that are important to producers of packaging, and our program today is going to focus on those parts of the program that likely will impact you the most. We will discuss different packaging products and why the fees are higher or lower for each category of product, the fee structure, and choices you can make to reduce the amount of fees that you may be required to pay. First, let's discuss the goals of the program and the objectives to achieve those goals, which will help you understand the product choices that produce the most benefit. The primary goal is to reduce the negative environmental, social, and health impacts from the production and end of life of packaging, paper, and food serviceware. Now, to reduce negative impacts, Oregon's program focuses heavily on supporting recycling. In fact, the program's stated goal is to achieve statewide plastic recycling rate target for packaging and food serviceware of 25% by 2028, 50% by 2040, and 70% by 2050. Now, the current rate of recycling in Oregon is estimated at 17%. So how are they going to achieve these very aggressive recycling targets? Oregon will do so by investing in recycling infrastructure, educating the public on what can be recycled and how to do so, and then standardizing items that can be recycled. All those activities require funding, and that funding is going to come from you through the fees that you are charged. When we get into the fee structures, you will see some of the covered materials categories are just so expensive, as much as $2.79 a pound, and that's because these materials are destined for landfills and there's just no responsible end market for them. As a starting point, a successful recycling program requires that the materials collected and processed for recycling are consistently delivered to responsible end markets. You will hear a lot of discussion about this term, responsible end market, which just means that there is the infrastructure in place to ensure that recyclable materials are actually recycled and reused over and over again. Investment in better recycling infrastructure across the state and the development and validation of responsible end markets includes the addition of many more collection points, better sorting technologies, etc. Oregon wants to ensure that consumers are not paying any more for waste management fees to fund these investments, and the goal is for these projects to be completely funded by producer fees. Now, what is also important to understand as a producer is the amount of effort and money that will be spent on consumer education and awareness. This has some serious implications for brands because we can expect consumers to get more educated on the recyclability of various packaging choices. The state and the PRO are going to invest lots of money to show Oregon consumers what's recyclable and what's not. That will also likely impact the way that consumers react to packaging when they see it on the store shelf. Now, the PRO will specifically do public outreach and awareness for Oregon consumers and waste generators so that they will gain an understanding of what materials have viable recycling options. Now, there are lots of materials today that are just too difficult to sort through, and so much of what is technically recyclable winds up being landfilled anyway because it's just too costly to sort out. So one of the big objectives of the program is to standardize what can be recycled. To do this, Oregon is creating a USCL, or a Uniform Statewide Collection List. This means that every collection site, doesn't matter if you're in a rural area or in a city within Oregon, each of these sites would accept the exact same materials, and that the Circular Action Alliance would take steps over time to increase the list of items that are collected, recycled, and delivered to responsible end markets. So the USCL, or Uniform Statewide Collection List within Oregon, will include items like corrugated cardboard, aluminum cans, PET water bottles, the easiest to recycle materials that already have a good end market in place. There's also going to be another list, which is called the PRO Recycling Acceptance List. Now, this is a broader list of materials that the PRO, or the Circular Action Alliance, agrees to manage and support under the EPR program. Items that have made it onto the PRO list include items like thermoformed PET trays, aluminum and steel aerosol cans, aluminum foil, shredded paper, glass jars and bottles, poly-coated paper, and even single-use plastic cups. Now, these items are not required to be recycled by the law, but the PRO can decide to trial or establish their own programs to recycle them if they wish. And so the CAA, or the Circular Action Alliance, is going to do a number of these trials to try to increase the percentage of total recycling in the state. So why would they want to add these items and make their job even more difficult? Simple. In order to meet the state-required recycling rates, things like PET thermoforms or glass packaging, which is not widely recycled across the state today, represents a massive amount of material that could be recycled if proper infrastructure existed. So again, the PRO is going to step in and try to add in these additional items so that they can achieve the mandatory statewide targets that are part of the regulation. Going back to the fundamentals, the fee structure created under the Oregon program is intended to reduce the usage of materials that aren't easy to recycle. High fees will incentivize producers to eliminate those types of materials. So let's jump into the fee structures. Now, before we get into the rates for each covered material category, we should point out that there is a flat fee option for small producers. So if you have under $5 million in gross revenues, then you are exempt and you do not need to report or pay fees at all. If you have gross revenues of at least $5 million but less than $10 million, you may either pay a flat fee of $4,400, for which no reporting is required, or choose to pay the tiered fee based on your reported data. So for a producer falling within the $5 million to less than $10 million revenue range, fees under the tiered structure, which depend on the amount of tonnage that you're shipping into the state of packaging, could be as low as $700 on the low end or as high as $4,400 per year on the high end. So they've created an option if you do not want to submit all of the data and go through all of the reporting steps, you can opt as a small producer to just pay the maximum amount of $4,400 per year as a minimum, and then you do not need to report at all if you meet that size requirement. Okay, let's get on with the meat of the masterclass, and this is the part that you're waiting for. Let's assume now that you are not exempt and you are not eligible for the flat fee structure. So you are like most producers and will have to use the fee schedules to determine what fees you will actually owe. Now, included within this masterclass is a PDF companion document. It is, in essence, the notes version of this class, and there is a full fee schedule available for your review. So I'm not going to go through each and every covered material class, but we will go through most of the big categories, pointing out where there are some big fees for certain materials and talking about what you could do if you find yourself with some significant tonnage in some of these categories. First, you need to understand the term single item material, or a SIM. A SIM refers to a distinct category of packaging or printed paper material or food service where within each covered material category that is treated as a separate line item in the fee structure under Oregon's EPR framework. So each SIM has its own estimated base fee, which is determined based on a number of factors like the material type. For example, is it a PET plastic or a corrugated fiberboard? Its actual recyclability, potential contamination rates of that specific material, individual processing costs, and the environmental impact. SIMs are key to understanding the levers that you have as you select packaging materials or you look for redesign options. SIMs will tell you the estimated fee per pound for each material that you might choose. Okay, let's review rates for some of the major categories. Let's start with printing and writing paper. This is going to be 1 cent per pound for any type of printing or writing paper, so it's a fairly minimal fee. Glass packaging, so glass bottles, jars, and other containers. Estimated glass fees range from 10 cents a pound on the low end to 14 cents a pound on the high end. That is a somewhat minimal fee, but glass is really heavy in comparison to plastic, so it can add up pretty quickly. Ceramics, if you use ceramics in your packaging, are going to have a range anywhere from 48 cents to 84 cents a pound. There really isn't a recycling system or end market for ceramics, so that is one of the reasons why the cost structure is much higher. Next, let's talk about aluminum beverage cans. These are highly recyclable, and thus the fee ranges from 6 to 8 cents per pound. Now, the reason that I'm giving you ranges is because Oregon doesn't know the exact amount of material that the producers are going to present as their estimated volumes. So once this data is all tabulated by the Circular Action Alliance, they will submit an actual rate sheet for the year. So they're currently giving us low to high estimates. Now, within metal containers, aluminum beverage cans like a soda can is expected to be pretty cheap, around 6 cents per pound. But if you go to something like aluminum foil or aluminum molded containers, those are going to be anywhere from 43 cents to 58 cents a pound, a significantly higher price because it's much more difficult to recycle those materials. Next, let's look at metal aerosol containers. If you think about a container for shaving cream, for example, a steel or aluminum container that is aerosol is going to have a cost between 73 cents and 98 cents per pound. Now, some of those cans can actually weigh almost a half a pound just in the packaging. So you can see that in some cases, you could be paying 20 to 45 cents per package just in these EPR fees. And so again, incentives and disincentives are built into these fee structures because some of these materials are just really difficult to recycle, and therefore you're going to have to pay a much higher cost. If we look at different types of paper and fiber packaging, in general, paper and fiber packaging has a very low cost structure. So things like craft paper, corrugated cardboard, and paper tubes are 3 cents a pound, which is minimal. But aseptic or gable-top containers and cartons like a milk carton or a Tetra Pak will range from 29 to 39 cents a pound. And poly-coated paperboard, which is a very common material used for everything from frozen food boxes to paper plates, is much more difficult to recycle and thus has a fee rate that is 10x higher than regular paperboard at 32 cents to 43 cents per pound. This is going to drive people to pick other materials or other coatings so that they can dramatically lower their fees. Okay, let's jump into plastics. Clear number one PET, used for things like water bottles, jugs, and jars. is the easiest plastic to recycle and thus has a fee rate between 17 cents and 23 cents a pound. If it's colored, so something like a green or light blue number 1 PET plastic, say for like a Perry bottle or a Sprite bottle, something like that, the PRO actually still wants to collect those materials because there is a market for them, but the cost will be significantly higher at between 58 cents and 78 cents a pound. And as you start to go through the fee structure, you will see a very wide range of fees. So let's pull out some of the bigger plastic material types and compare. HDPE jugs and bottles, high-density polyethylene, are highly recyclable and thus will have a pretty low cost structure of between 17 cents and 23 cents a pound, similar to PET. But the fees per pound of plastics escalates considerably as you get into harder to recycle materials. Low-density polyethylene, or LDPE, used for things like jugs, jars, and lids, have a fee rate of 82 cents to $1.09 per pound, and polypropylene comes in at 44 to 58 cents a pound. And then some of the materials which are really considered much more problematic are things like polystyrene, which comes in either expanded or foamed or hinged containers, plates, cups, tubs, and utensils, has a really high rate of $1.94 to $2.58 a pound. These fees are very high because they're trying to dissuade you from using these types of materials. Again, you'll want to review the full rate schedule to understand the fee exposure for your specific product lines. But what you should know is that most plastics, unless they are clear number 1 PET bottles, are going to be costly under EPR, with typical fee rates upwards of 50 cents to sometimes over $2 a pound, and that's really going to drive behavior change. Let's next review flexible plastics. Flexibles are used in a very wide variety of applications, from stretch film to candy bar wrappers to multi-layer food pouches to plastic bags. They are simply ubiquitous in packaging and can be designed for a variety of uses. However, flexibles are very hard to recycle. They often jam up recycling equipment or are too small to recycle efficiently. Therefore, flexible number 2, HDPE, or high-density polyethylene, and number 4, low-density polyethylene, or LDPE films, have a fee rate between 54 cents and 72 cents a pound, while number 5, polypropylene flexibles, range from $1.07 to $1.43 per pound. Now, this cost, in many cases, exceeds the actual cost for that virgin material when you buy it. So in some cases, you could be paying more in disposal or EPR fees than you're actually paying for the plastic itself. Now, just because a plastic has a high fee rate does not necessarily mean that you should switch to another material. There are lots of variables to consider, including shelf life for food products, weight, product protection characteristics, and other factors. Even with the fees, certain plastic solutions may still be the best option. However, there are lots of new options to consider, and these extremely high fee rates are driving major innovations in other categories, including paper. So we encourage you to review alternative materials in these high fee categories. If you move from an unrecyclable plastic to a recyclable one, you can dramatically reduce your costs. Can you possibly convert from plastic to paper? There's a massive trend right now called paperization, where brands are figuring out how to move from plastic packaging to paper packaging. And if you can do that, you will certainly see savings as you convert from a material that could cost upwards of $1 or more per pound down to something that's 3 cents a pound for similar packaging. This is really where sustainable design strategy comes into play. And this is the kind of consulting that we do every day at the Sustainable Design Lab. We use these EPR rate schedules along with the performance requirements of the product being packaged, and we design alternative packaging solutions using different available substrates. In most cases, we will generate multiple alternative designs that each have pros and cons. We can then do life cycle assessments to understand the impacts along with the costs of these different options. The top options can then be tested using a variety of ISTA standard and other types of tests to ensure that the more sustainable option meets the functional requirements of the packaging as well. Now, as you begin to consider different design options, let's talk about another very important rule that is part of this Oregon law. It's called the SAF, or the State Adjustment Factor. Oregon law specifically requires that non-recyclable packaging materials, those that are not accepted in the recycling system, must have higher average EPR fees than the ones that are recyclable. So to make sure this happens, the Circular Action Alliance uses a tool called the SAF, this State Adjustment Factor, and this tool allows them to adjust the base fees so that producers can't save money by choosing cheaper non-recyclable materials. So why does this rule exist? Because without adjustments like this, some non-recyclable materials might still be a lower cost option than a recyclable one. The Circular Action Alliance compares average fees for recyclable versus non-recyclable materials. If it discovers over time that non-recyclables are actually cheaper, then CAA will use the SAF to increase the total cost of the non-recyclable material. So you might find some short-term gain in a non-recyclable material, but that might ultimately be more costly. So we highly encourage you to focus on working with recyclable materials wherever you can. The whole law in this EPR program is built upon that, and so they're really trying to incentivize you to use recyclable materials. The Circular Action Alliance has indicated that they have created a base fee structure that will attempt to harmonize a national fee setting methodology that will be used consistently across states. The Circular Action Alliance has been named as the PRO in Oregon, California, Colorado, Maryland, Minnesota. And so they're going to try to create some harmonization to try to reduce the complexity that we're all going to have by having to deal with different states. But the fee rates will vary by state due to differing state requirements and program costs. So you will need to keep track of the complexities of these different state programs. Now, the estimates that they are providing today in Oregon's fee schedule are really just estimates at this point, based on what they expect the producer data to show when they receive it. Now, producers were required to provide this data by March 31st, 2025. However, CAA has issued a grace period or an extension to April 30th, 2025 for producers who failed to submit their 2024 data by that deadline. So if you haven't already submitted your data, you should work to get that submitted as soon as possible or before April 30th, 2025. The Circular Action Alliance will then use all of this data to create an updated fee schedule, which is to be released in connection with the start of the program on or around July 1st, 2025. But we believe that the estimates that they're using now in their initial program document are truly representative of what we can expect since they were modeled after other programs. Okay, let's jump into the next very exciting part of the Oregon program: incentives and how you can save money for your company through sustainable design. This is one of the most exciting and forward-thinking parts of the Oregon EPR program from my perspective. It's this incentive system, and it's designed to reward producers for making their packaging more sustainable. And this is called eco-modulation, and it's all about aligning your fees with the environmental impact of your packaging. So here's the big idea. The better your packaging performs for the planet, the less money that you're going to have to pay under the EPR program. So to do this, Oregon's PRO, or the Circular Action Alliance, has created a graduated fee schedule that gives you access to bonus credits if you go above and beyond in your sustainability journey. Now, there are two major bonuses and a third one that is currently still in development. But let's jump into the first two. Bonus A is the voluntary disclosure bonus. Now, the way this program works is if you conduct a life cycle assessment, also known as an LCA, on one of your packaging SKUs and share the results with the state, you can get 10% off of your base EPR fees for that particular SKU. Bonus A is capped at $20,000 per SKU, and you can submit LCAs for up to 10 different SKUs at one time. So you could actually save $200,000 in fees in the first year. Now, the bonuses that you can get are in the form of credits that you can use in the following year. So it's important to know that if you get ahead of this and you actually conduct up to 10 LCAs in 2025 on your top 10 SKUs, you can get that bonus in your 2026 bill. Now, at the Sustainable Design Lab, we have an LCA practice, and we can help you develop these LCAs. And there are other consultants out there in the market that could do the same, but it's an important opportunity that you can take advantage of if you're going to try to reduce your total cost structure going forward. Now, they also have bonus B, and this is an even bigger bonus tied to LCAs again, and this is where the real savings start. If you do an LCA and you show that your packaging changes led to a very significant reduction in your environmental impact, then you qualify for bonus B. And depending on how much you improve through things like switching materials, lightweighting, or increasing recycled content, you can earn up to a $50,000 per SKU bonus. Now, there are 3 tiers of rewards based on your impact reduction. So tier 1 is between a 10 and 40% reduction. Tier 2 is between a 40 and 70% reduction. And tier 3 is over 70% reduction. So bonus B is at least double the value of bonus A and is going to begin in the 2027 program year. So stay tuned for more information on how to apply for that. But what you need to think about this year during 2025 is that you have up to 10 SKUs that you can do your initial LCAs on, which could provide significant savings in 2026 under this bonus A. You can then take it a step further and apply for bonus B for further savings in future years. There is also a bonus C, which hasn't been outlined quite yet, but we know that it's coming soon, and they will reward companies that switch from single-use to reusable or refillable packaging if they can demonstrate real environmental benefits. Again, details are coming in the future through future program updates by the CAA on the value of this additional bonus C. So the more product you sell with packaging that you can demonstrate is less harmful to the environment, the more money you will save. Although you cannot obtain both bonus A and bonus B for the same product at the same time, you could get bonus A starting in this very first calendar year and then switch to bonus B, which is more valuable in later years. You'll also need to submit a third-party verified LCA through ISO 14400, and you'll need to follow the Department of Environmental Quality's life cycle evaluation tools, which will be released soon. Again, this is something that we can help you manage. So the bottom line is if you're investing in better materials, if you're designing for recyclability, or even if you're just measuring your package's life cycle impact through an LCA, there are potential bonuses available for you that you should take advantage of. We have been doing LCAs for years now at the Sustainable Design Lab, but this is the first time that the LCA is going to have a true financial incentive tied to it. So I'm super excited about that. Now you really have a financial incentive to do LCAs, and they can pay big dividends. This system is intended to financially reward data-driven decisions and sustainable design, which is going to create competitive advantage for smart producers. So that's it for the Oregon Deep Dive. Again, there is a companion PDF that we highly encourage you to download, which will have all of the details that we just went through in this episode. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode where we will dive into Colorado-specific details. Thank you.